it up, go and run it up, yeah, ay, go and run it up, yeah, gang, go and run it up, yeah, ay, go and run it up, yeah, gang. Learn to carry water, not gas. Devil should've killed me when he knew he had the chance. Don't have the spirit, then your fire won't last. Everything you did will be left in the past. Do what you know, not what you feel when you mad. Church stay pure, Holy Spirit better grab. Devil stay mad, taking cities from his hand. Yeah, you heard the word, boy, you living out the plan. Church on the move, tugboats flowing in the bay. Always train hard, so we ready when it's time to play. Pray when it's hard, stand strong, blessings on the way. Flow with the spirit, right road on the narrow way. 10 times down, stand strong, throw the chair away. Call the warrior son, no questions, already on the way. Devil get scared, cause we young got strong faith. We're known as a gang, and we're here to take our place. Holy Spirit with us, got the king, we done came up. Gang lit in this thing, time to flame up. Only riding for the king, we don't change up. Say songs for the king, go and run it up. Go and run it up, yeah, ay, go and run it up, yeah, gang, go and run it up, yeah, ay, go and run it up, yeah, gang.
Run it up like it's a marathon. Lock me up, the God got me, that's bell bonds. Shield and tape, breastplate, and my vest on. Send the message to your place like mailbox. No lie, I was a loser and a loner. Now I am a mover and a goer. He'll deliver to a giver, not a lender, but a sower. Me and John go run it till it's over. Flame be lit like it's a match. Love your city, where you at? Tripping off knowing I've been dumping shells and Satan, no debating, I ain't never going back. Nah, run it up, that's soul. My whole gang gung ho. Get them all to heaven, I ain't second guessing, it's a blessing. Jesus paying for that toll.
Holy Spirit with us, got the king, we done came up. Gang lit in this thing, time to flame up. Only riding for the king, we don't change up. Say songs for the king, go and run it up. Go and run it up, yeah, ay, go and run it up, yeah, gang, go and run it up, yeah, ay, go and run it up, yeah, gang.
Chicago, a city of champions, where legends are made. A population of 3 million, a city full of culture. But even with all its beauty, there's a cry that comes from within the inner city.
I'm 27. I've been in Chicago my whole life, and I've been to 10 plus funerals.
This is right here, man. That's 50 shots, man.
2 people were shot just in the alley back there. One of them in the head, and we saw police cover his body with a blanket.
We got a person shot awake and fled.
The problem of opiate addiction getting worse now.
Today, you will see a movement that is responding to that cry.
There's a need for our city to rise up.
What's up, Chicago? Welcome to the Chicago Wave. Listen, we're so excited for you to be here tonight, and we believe that God has something special for you. Matter of fact, what I want to do here tonight is I want to go ahead and let you know that Victory Outreach is in the house, and we're glad that you're in your house checking out what's happening right here at the Chicago Wave. You may be asking yourself here tonight, what is the Chicago Wave all about? Well, we want to let you know, listen, there is revival in Chicago. There's people out here that are getting saved. There's people out here that are seeing their life transformed, restored by the power of God. All the way from the south to the north side of Chicago, we're seeing gang members get saved. We're seeing drug addicts get saved. And not only that, we're seeing families get saved all over the city. And what God has given us is an opportunity. And tonight you may be watching and saying to yourself, you know what? Is there hope for me? Well, we believe by the end of this episode, you're going to see that there's hope for you and for your family. And so we want you to stick around. Or maybe here tonight you say, you know what? I want to shout out what neighborhood I'm coming from. Well, listen, we got people all over Chicago from every neighborhood. Do me a favor. Drop a comment right now what neighborhood you're coming from. I know that we've had Back of the Yards in the house. I know that we've had Little Village in the house. Humble Park is in here. I believe that we have communities all over Chicago that are jumping on and right here. So why don't you shout out your community? Maybe you're from Gage Park. Maybe you're from Little Village. Maybe you're from the east side or the west side. Well, man, we want to let you know you're welcome right here at the Chicago Wave. And not only are we seeing different gangs get saved, not only are we seeing different communities get saved, but we're seeing different people get saved. We're seeing young people get saved. We're seeing older people, man, transformed by the power of God. Tonight is special. You're in a treat for tonight because God is going to do something unique. Matter of fact, what I want to do is I want to show you what Victory Outreach does. Victory Outreach Chicago Wave, what we do on the streets. Check out what we do on one of our crusade recaps.
I'm telling you, it's a whole lot of investigating going on around here, man. I mean, they looking for us like we left or something. 17 Perka. Hey. I still got the recipe.
Listen, we're right here. Victory Outreach. We're right here in Pilsen. We just did a powerful street rally. We were just in Inglewood. We see a lot of people getting saved. The city is ready. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. So we need the church, you, Victory Outreach, get out here, get on the crusade, help out. We're seeing God move. Excited about what's going to be taking place. We got another 4 weeks of crusade, and we need you involved, amen. So hopefully we'll see you out here. Get out here, get on fire, stay on the God bless you, we'll see you out here.
Better go cut your grass. 17 break that glass. Living on my second chance. Going up like
Check it out. Listen, that's what God is doing right here in Chicago. Man, we're out there on the streets. We're praying for people. Matter of fact, tomorrow, you're going to see us on the streets. We're going to be out there sharing the love of Jesus Christ. We have something pretty unique that you probably never heard before in your entire life. We're calling it Prayer Patrol. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going inside of our cars. We're going to respect the law. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be driving around praying for people in hospitals, praying for first responders, praying for those that are sick. And we're believing that if God can perform a miracle in our lives, we believe that even in the midst of this tragedy, God can perform those that are there in that hospital. And so stick around. You're going to see next week what we did and how we were out there on the streets. And also, too, we're believing that God is going to be able to show his love and his mercy and his grace through what he's doing all over Chicago. And the Chicago Wave is all over the city. I talk about all over the city. And where we started at the Chicago Wave, it all started back in 1984. That's right. When Victory Outreach came right here to the city of Chicago. And what we've been doing is we've been taking people back all the way to the 80s and letting them know, listen, how Victory Outreach came here and how God has done it before. We believe God is doing it today. And tonight what I want to do is I want to give you a glimpse. I want to show you what Chicago looked like back in the 80s. I want you to take a look at this video and check out how Chicago was. Watch this video.
Chicago, the beautiful windy city. Let's rewind to the 1980s. The city is on the rise as Harold Washington becomes the first African-American mayor of Chicago with plans of rebuilding central area communities. The Chicago Bears are on their way to win their first Super Bowl with the greatest defense of all time.
Be smart. Let's go down and spin it. Let's go to work.
House music is born and becomes the sound of the city.
So-called house music was first made in the creators' houses. However it got its name, it's one of the hottest things going, and as Jay Levine reports, it may only be a matter of time before house musicians become heroes in their own home.
A young star, Michael Jordan, is taking over the NBA.
Michael Jordan has been a sensational show again. Jordan trying to fake Bird. Determination in certain points of a game. Michael Jordan.
The world's largest food festival hits the scene, the Taste of Chicago. Downtown Chicago is at its prime, with architecture and vibe. But there's a new culture rising in the inner city that can't be ignored.
Street gangs have been marking off turf in Chicago.
Everybody was on the streets.
The gang banging, you know.
Everywhere you hung out, it was crowds.
Back then, you could hang out in the streets in the crowd.
They had Chevys and you know, Caprices. You see them, the 9/8 Regencies, you know, the house music.
So it could be 25 guys right on that corner.
There was more structure, I think.
But yeah, there was structure, there were rules.
Just like a whole different way of life.
There was a chain of command in it, and even if you were opposition, there was still a certain limit.
PCP became really big, the liquid PCP.
PCP or an angel dust in a pill or paper form.
1 block to 2 blocks down, there's a different gang.
But there was Latin Kings, Puerto Rican Stones.
People are dying left and right.
Latin Eagles, Latin Disciples, Spanish Lords, Warlords.
Collecting sweaters, beating up rivals, taking their sweaters, collecting them like trophies.
So we had our sweater, and every sweater was a different color.
Or the gang's letters on sweaters or T-shirts.
A color according to whatever organization they belonged to.
So that was like the thing to do, you know, to let's see how we get more sweaters today or something like that, you know.
That some gang members have such strong beliefs that they are willing to die in the name of their organization.
With this sweater, they want it. I'm not saying. This sweater, they don't want me to talk. My people don't want me to talk.
So it became people and folk. And here in Chicago, some gangs chose the people side and some gangs chose the folk side. There was always someone trying to check you. Coming to the south side, you have to use your wisdom. You have to be smart.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Chicago Wave. And man, what a trip to see Chicago in the 80s, right? And tonight we're going to take you back. And who we have with us, we have some very special guests with us here tonight. We have none other than Pastor Ray and Gloria Castro with us. We're going to welcome you guys for being a part of Chicago Wave here tonight. And you guys are in a treat. I'm telling you, man, you're gonna get a lot of history of what God has been doing in Chicago and also about the streets. And, you know, tonight we're talking about Chicago in the 80s. You know, we're looking back about where it all started there in Pilsen in the 80s. And that's what I wanted to ask you guys here tonight. We have some viewers that are out there, and we have a lot of young viewers that didn't grow up at that time, you know, in the 80s. And they ask and they hear their parents and they hear, you know, different people talk about it. And I want to ask you guys, you know, how was Chicago back then in the 80s for you guys? What were some of the things that you remember seeing on the streets and seeing yourself be a part of?
Well, I grew up in Pilsen myself. I lived on 18th and Troop, so right outside of our window, because we were by a Troop play lot. The gangs would be there every weekend, and there was shootings, and it was just like, it was normal because that's what we were used to seeing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of violence.
Was it like that growing up, like every day, or was it you would see it just a lot, or how was it?
It was pretty regular. It was just something you get used to. it wasn't anything out of the ordinary to see that, you just knew that at this time on the weekend, you needed to go in because they were going to be shooting. Since we lived right next door to the true play lot, we knew how it worked.
Wow. And what kind of gangs were around at that time, around that area?
Well, the Spartans, I'm talking about the neighborhood I grew up in.
Right.
I don't even know if they exist anymore.
Wow.
Morgan Deuces.
Wow.
And because I was not in the gangs myself, I really don't. I know there was a lot of everything. There was, the counts and the bishops and just a lot of different gangs.
Now, Pastor, you weren't always a pastor.
No, I wasn't.
And how was it for you growing up in the 80s? What were some of the things that you remember?
Well, growing up in the 80s, it was like I was already, ripping and running the streets. Already, to me, it was like normal going into different neighborhoods and seeing the gangs, the colors. And I was talking to one of the brothers, and I was sharing with them how us, as being a gang member, the gang that I came from, we were like separated from other gangs. But one of the places, Pilsen, is where you would walk 2 blocks and you would see one gang, the other gang, and like the gangs that my wife mentioned. But there was a type of normality for me at the time. I would travel all the neighborhoods every day because I was dealing drugs. And so I would know people from the bishops, the Ambrose, the Latin Counts, the gangs that back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Some of them still exist, but some of them don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Chicago wasn't always bad in the 80s. You had a lot of good stuff. You had the 85 Bears,
Yeah.
the best team. If you're watching out there, you're not a Bears fan, we're going to find you and we're going to rebuke you. Just kidding, right? And you had Walter Payton,
Yes.
you had the best defense. You had Michael Jordan, coming into the NBA, and, had so many great things that were in the 80s. What were some of the good memories that you remember in the 80s at that time?
As for me, my good times were the La Vida Loca, just out there messing around. I never remember a time where I could sit down and watch a football game, a basketball game. You know what I mean? So my life was the best thing that happened to me in the 80s was me walking into the men's home.
Wow.
That's the best thing that ever happened to me in my life after in the 80s.
Now I want to ask you this, Pastor, because a lot of people that are watching, they say, well, man, that's a rough life to live. That's pretty crazy. Mi vida loca, for those who don't speak Spanish, that's my crazy life, right? And a lot of people say, man, they don't understand that it wasn't always like that.
Right.
When you're a kid, you don't dream about being a gang member. You don't dream about being a drug addict. You grow up wanting to be something productive. In school they say, I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a police officer, I want to be Superman. People have dreams.
Yes.
What are some of the dreams maybe as a kid, that you said, when I grow up, this is what I want to be? Before all the madness and the craziness, what were some of the things that you say, man, as a kid, this is what I dreamed of doing in my life?
Well, the things, as growing up as a kid, like you were saying, my dreams were to complete school and go on to graduating from high school and go on with my education. But I ran into the wrong crowd, man, you know what I mean? I believe in my sophomore year, my freshman year, my sophomore year. My freshman year, I'm sorry. and I got hooked up. I got hooked up with the gangs, and then from there, there was ain't no stopping me now, till 1984 when, like I say, when I gave my life to Jesus Christ.
And how was your household growing up as a kid? What was that like for you?
My household was good. I had a mom that, I was born in El Paso, Texas, and wow. The devil came in and destroyed our family, my mother's marriage, and my mom came with all 7 of us here to Chicago when I was 12 years old. And she was a good mom, a provider, and, no matter the weather, she was out there in the bus stop going to work, taking care of us, But we came, we came from a good family. My mom took care of us. She The only thing that we used to do as we got older, we started drinking with her and things like that. But we came out of a good home, you know what I mean? But there was no role models, you know what I mean?
Wow.
Older people that could steer me and guide me.
Yeah. That's heavy. And a lot of people, sometimes it happens growing up in neighborhoods, growing up with broken family, you see a broken life. How about you, Sister Gloria?
Well, like I said, I grew up in Pilsen, so it was like normal that most of the families were without a dad. There was domestic violence in our home. My dad was an alcoholic, and then when I was about 9, they separated. My parents separated for good.
Wow.
But, I think what was key for me was living next door to a playground. It may sound funny, but, what a kid's world is to play.
Yeah.
So we were like playing. It was more like community. And so there was, I can't say they were all bad memories.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really important to have that ability to play outside, even though things are going on at home.
Yeah.
So I have good and bad memories.
Wow. And one of the things I wanted to ask you guys is where did it all turn? Growing up as a kid, you definitely have good dreams. You have, some nightmares and some things that affected your life. Where did it change for you? You say, you know what, I came to a certain age at this point where I made a decision to make some wrong decisions. Where would you say that happened for you, Pastor?
To make wrong decisions?
Yeah. When did it become a place where I said, you know what, I'm going to really just get involved in my lifestyle?
When I, like I said, when I was a freshman, I bumped into, befriended a couple of guys, and then we got hooked up with the gangs, and then from there, a little bit of beer, a little bit of pot, a little bit of acid, and there was like nonstop after that, you know what I mean, till I reached a certain point in my life but it was young. Yeah. I was young. I started off young, and then I got pretty strung out, some heavy drugs,
Yeah.
To me it was like nonstop till I came to know Christ.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And how about you, Sister Gloria?
I was a goody-goody. In our ministry, that's the beautiful part, of our ministry. We reach all kind of people.
Yeah.
And it was to an extreme, I think. Sometimes you think you're okay.
Yeah.
I think that what was good and key for me was that the seed of the school buses, the yellow school buses, they used to come into the neighborhood. That was the only gospel that I ever heard, was when they took us to Indiana and they planted the seed of a lot of kids in Pilsen.
Wow.
And I believe that just, God used that until Victory Outreach came into the neighborhood. Then, of course, that was a real turning point in my life.
Wow. Now a lot of people, we have some pictures here today. I want to show you guys. Check out some of these pictures. This is, they can go ahead and show some of those pictures. I want to show them just some flashbacks. Now, maybe you can explain this picture right here, Pastor.
Well, this picture right here, it's me and some of the boys, the organization, the gang that I used to belong to. And I can still name you all the names. The guy in the middle right there was my brother John. They used to call him Papa C. And right there, he's in a wheelchair. He got shot up and paralyzed from the waist down. And then there's me to the left. We're at one of our friends' house, and we're getting loaded. We're getting loaded, doing drugs, drinking. But that's where I'm at in that photo.
And this became your family.
Yes.
Some of them weren't your family, right?
Yeah.
They became your family.
Yeah, they became my family. I believe that gang members get hooked up because they're looking for a family type of something to belong to. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they're searching. We're searching the wrong places. But yeah, that was like my family.
I think we have one. I think we might have one more picture that we're able to show. But man, what a heavy thing to see. A lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah.
That man, looking for a family. There's one more right here. Now this is Victory Outreach, right?
Yes. This right here, I was in the home already. I was in the home maybe a few weeks, maybe a couple of months. I don't remember exactly. But one of those guys was the director and the assistant director, I believe Stewart on the left. with the white T-shirt, and I believe they were making a flyer of me at the time.
Yeah. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about, this church, because that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about Chicago Wave. We're talking about Victory Outreach.
Yes.
And, if there was, we really believe this. If there was hope back in the 80s, we surely believe that God can do it today.
Sure.
And what I want to do is I want to show you a quick interview real quick. This is an individual from back of the arts, and he also grew up in some period in Pilsen. And he's going to explain a little bit about his story. But this is a quick glimpse of what it was like for someone to grow up in the 80s for this individual. Check out this video real quick.
Growing up as a kid, my mom and dad divorced when I was 3, so that means that I would stay at 2 places at the same time. So, and they moved around a lot. So it was like every year I was in a different school. So that means that I got into a lot of fights, because I'm the new kid in school, got to prove myself, get into fights, make friends, and then next year I start over again. So I moved around a lot, but because of that, I have a lot of friends. I met a lot of people. My memories of the streets of Chicago in the 80s was like breakdancing, the early 80s. I was young, and I remember my friends would come, as I hanged around with older guys too. They would come with their cardboard boxes and their boom boxes, start breakdancing in front, and I used to think I knew how to break dance. I'd try to pop and lock. I thought I was doing it in my mind, but I didn't know how to do that. So so I remember that, and then I remember the gang banging. I remember Chuck Taylors, Chevys, and Caprices. You see them, the 9/8 Regencies. The house music. The gang culture in the 80s, it was a lot more. How could I say? There was more structure. I think there was more unity amongst allies. There was more fights instead of shootings. There was still shootings, but there was a lot more fights. People knew how to fight back then. You know what I mean? Nowadays, it's like everybody wants to shoot, can't fight. But that's what the 80s was like. It's just different, like I look back, a lot of neighborhoods that were around back then, they're not around no more, or they're not what they used to be. I see a lot of stuff changed. All I can remember, like when I think about it, is mostly like just flashes of fights and rumbles, and then you got their gang sweaters, what I mean, collecting sweaters, beating up rivals, taking their sweaters, collecting them like trophies. My dreams as a kid, I remember like my teachers would ask me what I want to be when I grow up. And I used to think about it really good, and I never had an answer. I'd be like, man, I don't know. I don't want to be a cop. I don't want to, So I never knew what I wanted to be. So I remember then once I got a little bit older, still in grammar school, they're like, think of something that you like doing. So I thought about it, and I was like, really, I don't like doing nothing. So it's like, not that I didn't like to work, I always had a job, work, but it's just that I couldn't figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, because I didn't like to do nothing. So when I started thinking about street life or growing up like that, it started really young. I remember being 3 years old, being exposed to street life through my family, uncle, my dad, growing up in party scenes. In the 80s, my uncle was a DJ. One of my uncles was a DJ, so he used to DJ for the radio station. So every weekend, he would have a party. So every weekend, I was over there with them, because that's my dad's side of the family. So they'll throw parties. So I was in the party scene, little kid, with the parties and listening to grown-up conversations with grown-ups doing parties. And so it's more than just grown-ups, but what street life grown-ups do. So I grew up in that type of environment, and also I grew up in bars. My dad will take me to the bars, my other uncle will take me to the bars, and hearing, conversations, seeing them do drugs, doing everything was. I'm just right there with the guys. So those were like my role models. I grew up and stuff like that. So it was like that. Those were really like when you think about dreams or my dreams as a kid. That's all I had to look forward to. To me, that was the thing that stuff that they were talking about gave me something that was instilled in me that gave me like a target to aim for. Like this is what life's all about. I'm trying to be like this. I'm trying to be better than them. Stuff like that. So for me, growing up, like I started out like that really young. So by the time I was like 8 years old, I was already like running with little cliques. I had my little clique of 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, and we used to rumble in the alley with other kids and get just like not gang banging, but it's like we're living the life of gang bangers because that's what we were doing. So then by the time I was 12, I got involved in like party crews where it was like the last step before getting into gangs, and we're rumbling, we're ready running with guns and doing different things, and it was just like normal for me at 12 years old drinking. That's when I started drinking and started partying and started basically doing what I grew up seeing people do. Now I was like, okay, now I'm already grown. And I'm only 12 years old and I'm already doing it. So that was just like I was like my dreams are coming true. Like I was just going towards my destiny, like starting off, and it just started snowballing from there. So then from there, I ended up getting deeper. So then from there, my next step was getting into gangs, started gang banging, and then from there it's like, because before it was like I was doing things and I was doing it, but I wasn't really how could you say, like a part of a gang. So I wasn't, even though I hung around with different ones and the people I grew up with, but I wasn't one. But now it's like, okay, now I'm in it. So now it's like, okay, so I'm in it, and now this is my life now. Now I got certain things as all the rules changed. Because before there wasn't no rules, I was doing whatever I wanted. So now it's like, okay, now I'm in the structure, and now it's like a whole nother ball game. So from there, it was like, okay, now I'm catching cases. Now I'm going to Audi home, getting locked up. Yeah, so it was like this is just like a whole different way of life, a whole different way of living. To me, it was like I was in my own little world. Like everybody in the neighborhood, it's a whole nother world, a whole different way of the way we live, the way we think, the things that we do. And I think back, and I'm like, man, and it's not funny, but I should be, the stuff that I did, I shouldn't even be here right now. But it's only because of the grace of God that I'm here today. The stuff that the bullets flying by me, and it's like, wow, I look back like, man, that's crazy. I made it. I'm still here, but only because of the grace of God. But I mean, not looking back, if I could say something to my community, why they should change their lives and give their lives to Jesus, I would say it's because there's a couple reasons. For one, it's like, living without Christ, it's like you're living a life of emptiness. You're always searching for that, try to fill that emptiness that you have inside. Looking for it in whatever addiction, whatever sin, whatever. It might not start off as an addiction, but as time goes, time in that life makes your heart cold and hard, and you start, now you start doing coke, you start doing partying, and you're doing all these things, searching for that feeling, trying to fill that emptiness, that void that you have inside. And girls, or if you had the right amount of money, this big bag of weed or whatever it is, and you never find it, and you're miserable, and people search for it, and that's why a lot of people overdose, because they're trying to get to that feeling, and they could never get it. It's never enough. It's never enough. Even if you get money, you get all the money, and you get all these drugs or whatever it is that you think you need, and you still have that emptiness, right? So that's why Jesus came. to feel that emptiness, to feel that void. Once I got Jesus, it was like that was the missing piece. That's what I needed. All these other things wasn't maybe for a little while I'll be happy, but I wasn't satisfied. And that's part of it. The other part is that Jesus loves you. He died for you so that you could be forgiven. If you think about the passion of the Christ, look at everything he went through. Look at how much he suffered, and that's just a little piece. They couldn't put what really happened to him because you couldn't be able to watch that. It already looks crazy what they did to him. And he didn't have to do all that. He did all that to die for all of our sins. We're all sinners. And he died for all of us. He paid the price for all of us so that we could get to heaven. And the only way we could get to heaven is we repent from our sins and ask him for forgiveness and ask him to come into our hearts. So it's like he died for us so that we could be forgiven, but at the same time, he's offering us life and life more abundantly. So we don't have to live like that. We don't have to do those things. We don't have to be, but he came up to fill that emptiness in our lives so that we could be complete. And then he has a plan and a purpose for your life. That's something else, is that he has a plan and a purpose for your life. Why were you created? Why are you here? Why are you on this earth? Because he created you. He has a plan and a purpose for your life. And every job of a Christian is to go tell the people out there, hey, God has a plan and a purpose for your life. You don't have to live like this. There's a reason why you were created. There's a reason why you were put on this earth, and it wasn't for this.
Welcome back to the Chicago Wave, and what a powerful video that is. That's the truth. That's the truth of Chicago. You know, we have big buildings, great teams. You know, there's a great part of our city, but there's also a great need in our city. Some of the things he was talking about was gang sweaters. That was big back in the day, right? The gang sweaters.
Yes, it was. It was. These were heavily needed sweaters, you know, and you would get they were like fancied out with stripes, you know, and depending on the gang, the color, you know, all the colors were different. But it was, I remember that, you know, we used to go after other gang members and take their sweaters. That was one of the things that would take place with every gang member at the time, you know. Yeah.
Did you see that as well? You see like guys fighting over sweaters and things like that?
I didn't see so much of that, but I did know, you know, that every gang had their colors in their neighborhoods.
Wow. So every gang had their color, they had their look, they had their style.
Yes.
Wow. And it's so heavy how you said, you know, I think a lot of people don't really understand. Maybe you're watching, and we want to welcome you for jumping in. But one thing I want to ask, Pastor, is, you know, one of the things a lot of people don't understand is sometimes living in that life, the mindset, the mentality, you know, it's for some people it's so far off. You know, maybe you can explain that, Pastor. What is that mindset like?
Well, the mindset is just like any other addiction. You can, you know, like Lalo was sharing on the video, that, you know, that God created us with an emptiness that only He can fulfill, you know. And meanwhile, we're blinded the way we are spiritually, like the Bible says. We're dead in our transgressions, in our sins. We go after what's going to please us, you know. And I believe the mindset of a gang member is they want to earn recognition and you know, be part of the gang, you know, and it's just like another addiction. You get hooked on that, you know. I know friends up to right now, people that I know, they're still hooked on that gang mentality, you know what I mean? And like I share with them, hey, God did it for me, God could do it for you.
Yeah, and it affects not only the individual, but also affects the family.
Sure does.
It not only the devil doesn't come to kill, steal, and destroy just the gang member, but it happens in families' life. And Sister Gloria, you work with families, you know. Maybe you can explain that. Maybe there's a family out there and you're watching and you say, man, is there hope for my family? Maybe you can explain that what happens to the family as well.
It does happen to the family. When we were living in Pilsen, we went from Pilsen to Little Village, and we actually lived right across the street from the gang house, so I think we went from bad to worse. And my sister got very involved in the gangs, and she started living in the streets, and it was a real horrible experience. You didn't know if she was going to live or die, and it was like that for some years. So it absolutely destroys a whole family. I had a brother who committed suicide. He was 18 years old. He didn't get involved in the gangs, but a hurting family, everybody's affected by a hurting family. So we experienced all the pain that there's a lot of pain in the neighborhood, and we were part of that. We felt that pain.
You know, Pastor, we have people that are viewing in, and something that Sister Gloria said so heavy is that behind all of that mentality, all of that mask, there's pain.
Sure is, yes.
What is that like? What is those feelings you get living that lifestyle?
Well, you know, the Bible says that there is pleasure in sin for a season. Yeah. And, you know, you think that whoever's hearing me right now, you know, if you're young, you know, it's just like when I got involved, you know what I mean? We think that it's cool and whatever, but, you know, then you get deeply into the lifestyle, man, and there's consequences. You know, yeah. You're talking about prison. You're talking about. I had a brother shot up. We were all involved in violence. He got shot up, paralyzed from the waist down, and so it's something that it happens, and if you continue to stay in there, man, it's going to be a lot of heartache, a lot of headaches, heartache, prison time. See your family wind up in the joint in prison for years, or dead, or paralyzed. You know, so yes, it's a style that it's real dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous. You don't know, like my wife was saying. You know, you don't know. Like I had my one of my kids involved in gangs, and man, you know, sometimes if it wasn't for the Lord, man, I would go crazy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because, you know, I was thinking they're gonna kill him out there. But he settled down. You know, he's okay right now. You know what I mean? But yes, it affects the whole family.
And it's so heavy because, you know, back then, you know, we were talking, and we're kind of like looking back and saying, like, man, like you were saying something about your rap sheet, right? Like, like, man, you had to take a rap sheet and, you know, look at it, and it was like, man, back in the day, it was like you can have a lot of gun charges, be right in and right out. But it's like today, man, they hit you with some hard time.
Yes.
You know, today, you know, maybe you're watching, you're saying, man, you know, that lifestyle's fun. Just like Pastor said, man, it all comes to an end. It does come to an end. And, you know, the consequences even now are more severe, you know, because people are something he said in the video, which I don't know, maybe Pastor, you can clarify. He said back in the day, the gangs were a lot more structured. They had a lot more discipline. They had a lot more leadership. Today, it kind of seems like in Chicago, the gangs are a little bit less disciplined. You know, would you agree with that, Pastor? Or?
I sure can. You know, and the reason I believe the ones that are more structured were the ones in the penitentiaries. You know, I mean, they get structured in there. They come out and they expect the gang members out here to be like them. But it's just a big old lie, you know what I mean? Because the gang members, they belong to those certain gangs. They are structured. Sooner or later, they fall into the traps of the webs of sin, drugs, alcohol, and that's one thing, you know, that the structured gangs used to be. They didn't want their members getting involved with the certain drugs, and all of them did drugs. You know, it's like nowadays, everybody does drugs. Yeah. You know, so that's a big old lie. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know, we know that's all of the devil. You know what I mean? The devil, he knows how to work like the scripture you just mentioned. The devil comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy. You know, and that's his job. You know, he hooks him up like that, and then, you know, then the end is death.
Let me ask you something, Pastor. Did you ever remember, like, people ever trying to reach out to you? Do you ever remember people trying to, like, tell you, like, hey, man, listen, you're headed down the wrong path?
Not really. Not really. Everybody that was around me, if you didn't carry guns, sold drugs, did dope, you weren't right. You couldn't hang around with us, you know. Yeah. So we didn't have any kind of role models like that till one of my brothers got shot up, paralyzed from the waist down. I had one of my homeboys that were in the same gang together. He's a pastor now, Pastor Andrew Ronald from Assemblies of God. He's still pastor right now. Well, that's who God used to bring me to Victory Outreach. And I remember when we didn't see him around with the crowd. I used to ask the homeboys, hey, what's his name? You know, we used to call him Dookie. You know, if you hear me, Dookie, you know, just, you know. you know. But and so then God used him. He became a Christian. And I remember I was asking some of the homeboys. I said, "Hey, you know what's his name?" And they said, "I don't know, man. He turned Christian or he turned minister or something." And I didn't even understand the word minister. I said, minister, it was like to me it was like foreign language, you know. Yeah. So I said, this guy probably went gay or something, you know. That's what I said, you know. I mean, you know, I love the gay people. I love all sinners because Christ has put the love in my heart to reach out to them and to save them, you know. But that's what I said, you know. But
in your ignorance back in the day,
right? In my ignorance, exactly, right. So he's the one that went to the hospital, the only one that went to the hospital to visit, to pray for my brother, and that's when God started dealing with all my family, you know, with me. And then he would take me to church. I would have a gun on me, you know, PCP'd out, and you know, and then after that, he would ask me, you know, where do you want me to drop you off? I said, drop me off at the bar, you know. But that was the beginnings of how the Holy Spirit, God was, working in my life, you know, and then finally, I was telling one of the brothers, man, that Pastor Cal, I think back in '83 or I think '83, he was supposed to come in and they had a plug for him right there on Fiesta del Sol on 18th Street, and I was supposed to go to the ranch. They had told me, my friend Andrew told me, hey, Ray, you know, these guys from California, ex-drug addicts, ex-gang members, and, you know, they have a ranch, you know, where you could go and get your life together, man. So I was tired, you know. So the day that I was supposed to meet Andrew, I went to the Fiesta del Sol, but I ended up getting loaded. I met some of my partners again. I, you know, started some drugs and did some drinking, and here I go another year, man, you know what I mean, you know, wasted. So, but the following year, that's when Pastor Rick, thank God for Pastor Rick, our spiritual parents, and they came to establish the church in 1984. And the church was already there like a few months, right? That's when I came into the home. And that's when my friend Andrew took me to the home. He said, Ray, they're here already. They got the church going. Why don't you go? They got a men's home. So I went and I stood there. And just like a lot of guys, when they come into our rehabilitation homes, they say, I'm going to stay here just for a little bit and then I'm gone. Yeah. And, you know, I've been here for 35 years already in Victory Outreach. So, you know, so I haven't gone nowhere, but, you know, just in the journey with God, man.
And God did that for you.
Yes,
God
He did.
did that for you. It all comes to an end. Maybe you're here tonight and you're watching and you're saying, man, you know, does it end for me? Does it come to an end? I came to let you know this. It does come to an end.
Yes, it does.
That life does get old. That pain, it does get old. And maybe tonight you're watching this and you're saying, man, I want it to end. There might be somebody here tonight that says, you know what, man, I want it to end. I want this to all be gone. I believe that God is going to do that for you here tonight. Don't leave. Don't leave, because these are words that are not just going to inspire you, but they're going to change your life. If God did it for Pastor Ray, if God did it for Sister Gloria, we believe God can do it for you. Maybe, Sister Gloria, you can share. When did it all end, that life of just without God? When did that end for you?
Well, my story's different. Like I said, I was a goody-goody, so I was married to a drug addict at the time, and I was hurting. I was living like in hell, I would want to say. And somebody told me, if you go to a certain church, they'll pray for you. And it was a small Pentecostal church, and I was there for about 8 months, and because there was so much domestic violence, it was dangerous for me to continue in the relationship. Yeah. They said, you know, there's a ministry that just came to Chicago, and we believe that they could better work with you. And they said, Victory Outreach just got here. We don't really know their information. They couldn't give me the information. So what happened was I went home after they told me that it was best if I went to Victory Outreach. And I was watching the Christian station. And who's on the Christian station? It was Pastor Rick and Fernando Rivas.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he gave all the information. So it was the way I was able to make contact. It was a baby church. I was there like about a month before who now is my husband, got there. So we got to see the beginnings of many miracles. So that was my turnaround. You know, sometimes you think because somebody doesn't do drugs, and there's pain. There's a lot of pain. And, you know, I was hurting so badly that they would take me out of the service in that Pentecostal church.
Wow.
Because I would just weep. I would just cry. And even when I came to Victory Outreach, I think I cried for a whole year. I just was so broken. Wow. But I just felt like the presence of God. My life was never, ever the same. I was truly transformed because I had no desire for anything that didn't include the Lord. I was hungry for God, and who did God put in my path but Pastor Rick and Sister Jeannie? And Sister Jeannie knows how to disciple women. So that's why that's why we're here today, because we had such strong discipleship.
You know what's so heavy is not only, Pastor, do the gangs affect your life, but also the drugs. You know, you mentioned something. It was a battle because there was drug addiction there. Yes. You know, maybe somebody's watching here today. Maybe you could also explain that drug addiction. You know, especially back then, there's different drugs. You know, there was, you know, a lot of people were doing PCP, a lot of people were doing acid, a lot of people were doing heroin. Maybe you could talk about that drug addiction. What was that like?
Well, in the Bible, it talks about there's a way that a man think it's the right way, but it's the path to death. And when you're young, you know what I mean, you're vulnerable, you know what I mean, to the attacks of the enemy, and that's what he comes to do. He comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy, right? And I remember that at such a young age of my life, man, that I started. So hear me out, who's ever hearing me. If you're young, amen. The way I started was drinking and smoking pot. Amen. And that's what happened. I continued smoking pot, and then I wanted higher highs. Then I started messing with mescaline, acid, and then I started with PCP, and then heroin, cocaine. And by the time I got tired of all the drugs, I had like 5-6 different types of habits when I came into our rehabilitation home, and it's a nightmare. It feels good at first. I didn't leave drugs because I hated drugs. You know, I made a move to change my life to leave the drugs because they destroyed my life. They destroyed everything around me, and yeah, there's pleasure in sin for a moment, but then there comes heartaches and prison and death. You know, and all these things and then like now I hear a lot of young people, well, it's okay to smoke marijuana, but all the friends that I had to smoke marijuana became vegetables, and you know, we got all messed up. But yes, there's hope. There's hope. If anybody's hearing us today, there's hope for you, for your family. If you're young, if you have kids that are strung on drugs, gangs, seek the Lord. Your hope is in Jesus Christ. He can change anybody. If he changed me, you know, I was weighing 96 pounds when I came into the men's rehabilitation home. I never knew what it was to sit down and have a normal dinner with the family. I was ripping and running in the streets. Then I got married at the age of 18, 19 years old, blew that marriage because of drugs and the lifestyle that I was living. Everything was destroyed, you know, till I came into rehab. You see, Jeremiah chapter 1 verses 5 says that God knew you even before you were created in your mother's womb. That God already knew you. God already had you in your mind even before you were born. And he has a plan. He has a purpose. He has something special for you out there, you know. And I never knew that. I remember when I got saved, I went through the rehabilitation home, started working, and I would carry my Bible in my car. And I said, man, you know, like I would trip. Is that me really? I mean, you know, I used to carry guns and drugs and be all roped down with all kinds of gold around my neck and a big old red Cadillac, and you know, and then to turn Christian, then it would blow my mind when I would see my Bible in my car. But that is what God is able to do. God is in the miracle working business. He could change anybody. So if anybody's out there and you say, you know what, there's no hope for me, there is. God can change your life.
Now, Pastor, you said something so heavy, how it was pleasurable for a moment, and to be honest with you, it was something that you enjoyed, but it destroyed your life.
Yes.
It's so heavy how, you know, I heard someone say this, the devil minimizes